And so before we even jump into sunscreen, and let's step back a little bit and talk about, what is your philosophy about photo protection? And usually people always automatically jump into sunscreen, but before we jump into sunscreen, what other modalities out there? What do you recommend to your patients?
Yeah, I think it's simple behaviors. The truth is the best sunscreen is something that will physically block the sun. So, thinking about clothing choices certainly is very important. Hats, sunglasses, whether long sleeves, pants. I always joke with my patients, the muggy, humid, swamp-like environment of DC in the summer, not very conducive to that type of clothing. But I think we're fortunate we live during a time where you can have your cake and eat it too, and there's clothing designed to both protect but also to really acclimate to the environment. Not saying that's very fashionable, but it does a trick, no question. I think certainly seeking shade when possible, though that's not always possible. And I always say that caveat, like these are the things you can do. You have to figure out what's best for you. There's not a one size fits all. I talk about obviously the peak hours, and I do have some patients, for example, who will only go running or walk outside, at like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning or late at night. So it's not so crazy to suggest trying to avoid outdoor time. But then I also talk about window exposure, which I think is important.
Yeah.
Someone sitting by a window, while a lot of windows will filter out UVB, they miss the UVA, which won't be as obvious in terms of exposure. It's not as erythemogenic as UVB, and so you could be causing damage. And actually, a recent Nature Communication paper really highlighted the potential injury with UVA on various cell lines and the mutations that are incurred. So I think that it's being mindful of your environment, but some very simple measures to physically block UV radiation. And I know also the whole kind of thing about visible light and blue light from screens that people are talking about more from a photo aging perspective. I really don't get too much into those patients bring it up, because honestly, how much time do we have in the office? And I think to me, the big things are what's going to kill you or what's going to maim you. And that's going to be, obviously skin cancer and resulting surgery, or, if it's too late beyond that, and, adjunctive therapies that could be life-saving, but also life-altering. So I'm really going to focus more on that.
No, so I mean, I think you're sort of advocating the comprehensive approach, right? And
Absolutely.
avoidance and clothing, shade, and then last sunscreen. And you're absolutely right. And I think just minor point, I think there are some really beautiful UPF clothings and much more fashionable, and you should come to
My wife would disagree, but